Hi everyone, this is For the Love of Comics, and in this episode we continue our mini Will Eisner festival by looking at a couple of ways to approach or start reading the works of Will Eisner in comics. If you'd like a bit of an idea about Eisner and what he achieved in particular with A Contract with God, take a look at our What is a Contract with God video linked above. But otherwise, let's get started on how to get started reading the comics work of Will Eisner. Will Eisner had a long and storied career in comics, and his first significant contribution to the medium was arguably The Spirit, his 1940s-1950s newspaper strip and page, about a masked crime fighter and detective. The Spirit is an excellent series that broke new ground in storytelling, design, and in defying expectations, both expectations of the form, the episodic comics serial, as well as expectations of genre of the masked crime-fighting hero. Being a detective rather than a superhero meant The Spirit tackled a wide variety of cases, which allowed Will Eisner plenty of room to tell not just hard-boiled crime stories with mob bosses and femme fatales and colorful lackeys, but also allowed the stories to flirt with science fiction, horror, mystery, goofy comedy, family drama, emotional slice of life, almost any genre that you can think of for an episodic comic series. The Spirit also reinvented the form of the newspaper comic by using different design and layout and compositions based on the type of story and the tone and the mood that was required for each occasion. Having run for around 12 years as daily strips and Sunday pages, The Spirit has a couple of thousand pages of stories, which can be hard and expensive to track down. You'll need to pursue more than 25 volumes of the Spirit archives to get everything. And there are various reprints by DC Comics, Kitchen Sink Press, and Quality Comics that you could try and track down. Which is why DC Comics' trade collection, The Best of the Spirit, is such a great little book. Starting from the origin of the Spirit in 1940, this collection samples stories from across 10 years of the serial's run, all the way up to 1950, where you have the introduction of femme fatale sans serif. This range presents a perfect sampler of a lot of the Spirit's experimentation and success, both with form and with story, from the way that shadows and color were used over here, the shape of panels, the pacing, the focus, and it's a great place to get a taste for the wide variety of things that Eisner would continue to bring to comics later. A sense of urban working class realism, dingy alleys, cramped apartments in rundown tenements, and a focus on everyday life and minor characters. Indeed, there are some stories in which the Spirit barely appears or doesn't really have any effect on the outcome. He's hardly infallible. He's constantly getting beaten up or knocked out or captured. He's being bamboozled and led astray by alluring women. And the stories, focusing as they do on what genre or what twists or what emotions they want to focus on, these stories take center stage more than the hero character, which is part of why it's still so appealing today. So start with The Best of the Spirit, and there's another collection from DC Comics, The Spirit Femme Fatales, to see if you'd like to pursue this any further. Once you've had your fill of the Spirit, or if you're more interested in starting with Eisner's realistic and longer form work, you can turn to the books that he published from 1978 onward till his death in 2005. Publishers W.W.Norton own the Eisner library of these books, and you can find individual paperback volumes of almost all of them, even if some of them may be not that easy to find. What you would want to start with, and what is easily available, is A Contract with God, his first graphic novel, about which I talk in some detail in the linked video you can access by clicking on the top right of your screen. A Contract with God presented 4 short stories about residents of one tenement building in the Bronx in the 1930s, including the title story of a man who makes a contract with God to live a good and devout life, but considers it betrayed on suffering a senseless tragedy. The Street Singer tells of an alcoholic, abusive man trying to scratch loose change together by singing in the alleyways between the crowded slum-like tenements, and his sordid life and encounter with an an aging diva who tries to use him. The Super is a story of a racist bully who serves as the building's superintendent and his unsettling interaction with a pre-adolescent girl that goes in an unexpected direction. And Cuckoline, I think it's Cuckoline, a multi-character ensemble set during a working-class holiday in the Catskill Mountains, the most complex and autobiographical story in this collection. A Contract with God saw two sequels, A Life Force and Dropsie Avenue, which told more stories about characters who lived in that building. The first of these, A Life Force from 1988, is a sprawling story that branches out from one character, a poor old carpenter struggling to get by, to equally desperate lives around him, as they use and depend on each other to survive and to try to flourish through the Great Depression, the rise of socialism, and the coming of World War II and the Holocaust. Dropsie Avenue in 1995 saw Will Eisner becoming even more expansive with his canvas in telling the history of the Bronx neighborhood from those earlier stories, Dropsie Avenue, and by starting it in 1870 when it was still farmland. It charts the coming of the English, much to the ire of the German settlers, and then the English are shown resistant and eventually replaced by Irish immigrants. The Irish immigrants who turn after some years to bemoaning about the influx of the Italians, who then struggle with the arrival of the Jews and Puerto Ricans and other Hispanic communities. And these constant shifts in ethnic majority and dominance also touch upon racial variation with the early black community in the Bronx. Dropsie Avenue is like a tidal wave of history and sociology, which nevertheless feels extremely intimate. And this is because Eisner moves the larger stories of immigration and economics and politics and city planning in the background through news snippets or headlines, while focusing the scenes on families with marriage problems, financial burdens, business plans and bureaucratic navigation, starting, running, operating a business, dealing with the mob, so on and so forth. The coming of new ethnicities, the feelings of us and them, the ruckus created by inter-ethnicity relationships or marriages, feelings of blame and superiority. No matter how things change in the details, the larger picture always looks and feels the same. This is Eisner's best kind of storytelling, one that largely focuses on withholding judgment or verdict, is far more interested in showing us people and beliefs and behavior that feels true. And this is why the Contract with God trilogy of books is the perfect place to start reading Will Eisner's grown-up, realistic, and acutely observational comic stories. All three books have been collected by Norton into one hardcover volume, the Contract with God Trilogy, Life on Dropsie Avenue. And this is a terrific alternative to buying all three individual paperbacks. Because they were spread out over time in their writing, 10 years between the first and the second book and 7 years between the second and third, with other books in between, and because you don't need to have read anything else, you can read them in any order. These give you a full sense of Eisner's continuing growth and interests in storytelling and exploring what the comics medium let him do. And because they focus on the genre that, in my opinion, Eisner was most effective at, that of the family and personal everyday drama, they serve as the best entry point for someone not sure what to expect from an older or revered comic. Some of the other books that I would recommend from the Norton Eisner Library, there are more than 20 books, would be The Building, A Family Matter, and The Name of the Game. But if you know, or if you have a feeling that you're going to like Eisner, I strongly recommend picking up one or both of the other Norton hardcover collections, Life in Pictures and Will Eisner's New York, Life in the Big City. Will Eisner's New York, Life in the Big City collects 4 of Will Eisner's New York set books: New York, the Big City, The Building, City People Notebook, and Invisible People. And Life in Pictures collects 3 autobiographical books by Will Eisner, along with 2 short stories. The short stories are A Sunset in Sunshine City and The Day I Became a Professional, and the books are The Dreamer, To the Heart of the Storm, and The Name of the Game. So if you get all 3 of these hardcovers, you'll get 10 of Will Eisner's best books, along with a couple of short stories, introductions, prefaces, new illustrations, and you'll have those best stories in a handsome and convenient format. There are many different reprints and series of Eisner's work out there, including 70s and 80s reprintings of the spirit and serializations of his longer work, commemorative and scholarly works, and there will be plenty more. One of my favorite ways of reading and collecting Eisner has been through these issues of Will Eisner's Quarterly, brought out in the 1980s by Kitchen Sink Press. There are not just letters and interviews and other articles, but also the large format and the subtler colors on the spirit than later reprints, alongside serialization of longer works like A Life Force, make this a fantastic thing to read as an introduction to Will Eisner, getting a sampling from across times and styles in a very pleasing format. If you can get your hands on them, I would strongly recommend trying to get a couple of copies of Will Eisner's Quarterly. And so there you have it. Read the best of the spirit to try out the spirit, seek out femme fatales if you're interested, and the spirit archives if really interested. If you're not sure Eisner will be your cup of tea, start with the paperback of A Contract with God and move on to the other books in the trilogy, or just grab the trilogy in one volume and follow it up with the other two hardcovers. And that's what I would suggest for starters today. And I'd love to hear what you think. Let me know if you try any of these out or if you'd have a different approach you'd suggest. Thanks for watching.